Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, this joy to the world, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, this joy to the world. I bring a message of the truth amidst a world full of lies. I graduated from learning lies to see the truth, indoctrinated to be too blind to see the proof. I once was lost, but now I'm found, so I shine light. And everywhere I go is darkness, so I shine bright.
O Timothy, keep that which is committed to your trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. That's 1 Timothy 6:20, and you are now tuned in to the 32nd episode of the Uncommon Ground Show. And I'm Wes Blaze, joined by the co-host you ought to know. Welcome back, Sean, my bro.
What's up, Wes Blaze? Thanks for having me back on this week. We got some fun stuff to talk about.
That's right. And you're a blessing, fam. Thank you for being here as always. Yeah, I'm ready to get back to another fun topic tonight, right? With the subject of creation and cosmology, there's just so much to explore, especially when we have to navigate through such a extensive minefield of lies so often, right? So we want to try to cover as much of it as we can for our viewers. And tonight we're going to branch off into one of those facets of science, falsely so called, as Paul wrote to Timothy, right?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
It's amazing. This particular topic is forcing us to combine ideas like toilets and snipers all in one episode. So it's going to be fascinating.
And hurricanes, of all things. Weather patterns. Storm cells. That's right. Such a weird combination. And we're going to find out what is it that they all have in common. That's the question that I hope for us to answer tonight. There's something they say they all have in common, but we're going to kind of reveal some truth on that. So, but before we do, we want to show some love to our friends joining us live. So do you see anybody in the chat that you would say what's up to?
Yeah. Prodigal Son's back. Miss Marsha's here. EFT UP World is here. Charles Rockefeller's back. Pepper Mandy, following the lamb today. I'm seeing Tyler Porter's back. And there's so many more.
So much. We have Amber Joe, as well as my beloved girlfriend, wildly unpopular, is in the chat as always. Much love.
Miss Morgan's here. Thank you to Rich P for the super chat. He already dropped a super chat for us.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, Rich P, you are appreciated, brother. Yeah, and so we want to also, show some appreciation back to the continued encouraging responses that we keep getting. You know what I mean? So
that's right.
They respond to what we're doing, and it'd be an honor to highlight a few of them if we could.
That is right. We're happy to say thank you to Elizabeth Watkins. You want this first one?
Sure. She says, I'm a little late on watching Uncommon Ground, but I really like it. Why? Because the peaceful fruit of the Spirit is evident in them both. They speak the truth in love rather than being a clanging gong. That was a great episode. She's talking about episode 2 back in season 1, right? She says, and I was blown away by the 2 videos they share of evolutionary scientists, including Bill Nye. Never has it been more clear that there is a battle over our children's minds, and it's up to parents to educate our children, even if they're in public school. Worth a watch for sure. Man, Miss Elizabeth, that kind of thing means a lot, and it's just continually blowing us away to get these kind of responses, and that's what we do it for.
Yeah, we're so grateful. I mean, we're growing. We're so grateful for people that are following us, hearing us out, because a lot of things we talk about, the world, specifically the public education system and mainstream news, they would disagree with what we're saying, right? So for you brave souls that are out there watching us, and you have thought that what we're talking about is being evidently proved through scripture and through scientific observation, and you're still here and giving us amazing comments like this, you guys are super appreciated, because it encourages us to keep going with what we're doing.
Well said, brother. Exactly. I couldn't say it better myself. What does AD say?
AD said, you guys, all the love. My 7 and 4-year-old boys jammed to the UG intro. Seriously though, thank you so much for bringing talented believers on. I've been missing music for a few years, and it was once my life. It is such a blessing to have safe music of all style to jam with my boys.
Hey, yeah, that's a blessing for sure. All praises up, because there's a serious lack, I feel like, of music that can be safe to listen to around the family. A song that you can play and not worry about offending little ears or your grandmother in either case, right? So we want to. part of my mission with this channel for sure.
Thank you, AD.
Virginia Powers, she
Miss
says,
Virginia.
yeah, what a great show. Love for you all. Feeling super blessed on this journey of truth. Knowing our Heavenly Father is right here just above has provided me with such passion I never knew possible. It's shows like this that have taught me to not just the truth, but how to study and share. Yeah.
Awesome.
So feeling so dang blessed.
Awesome.
We have to agree and concur as well. So dang blessed.
So the scripture you read from Timothy, as we open the show, think about the believers in the first century AD. They did not have this type of resource. They did not have mass media. They did not have the ability to create PowerPoints and slides, systematic, image filled, 3D animation filled, video, music filled teachings that you can then go and show other people, or you can then pick up a computer, an Apple, a PC, and start making your own graphic slides and videos and songs and information. And there was no GarageBand back then to make your own little beats. Nothing, you know what I mean? So like, imagine whomever controlled the information, which usually was the priesthood of the Baal and Zeus and the idolaters. So they would control the information for science. So that's who Paul is actually speaking against in that passage that WesBlaze opened up with. And so here today, we have someone like Virginia who is benefiting from the blessing that we can come and make our own materials to share the truth with you, and you can spread it yourself. So we're just blessed to be in this day, being in this day with all this technology and the ability to share it to so many people without physically going to their town. To me, it's like, I just think of Yeshua's statement, to whom much is given, much is expected. Yeah. It's like, so Lord, help us be faithful and dutiful with what you've given us to share your truth.
Amen. Very well said. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir. And so speaking of also, blessings from the community, we want to give some blessings back, right? Our viewer appreciation. We also announced a giveaway during our last show that we had. It's been about a month now, so we're happy to be back. But that giveaway, if you may have skipped that episode because our guest was a musician you hadn't heard of yet, not only did you miss out on a great testimony and some really awesome music, but you also didn't get to hear the details for one of our giveaways because it pays to tune in to Sean and WesBlaze. Because that being said, we have two prizes set up. One for one lucky Patreon member, we have a USB jump drive, and that's going to have all of the Uncommon Ground episodes to date on it, as well as loaded with some extra surprises. And you are also going to receive a set of Uncommon Ground colored themed ZZ tassels, like the ones I've made here that I'm wearing. And so that is a part of it.
Of those.
Yes, sir. So that's a part of it. Yeah. Gonna throw in 2 stickers. That's the grand prize giveaway, if you will, for the Patreon. And so that being said, Sean, I'm going to do a drum roll here in a second. And if you would,
all right.
Pick another number for me. And this number is going to be anywhere between 2 and 68. Now, if you guess a number and you want to change your mind, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it because that would make somebody sad.
So we're going to stay away from all the Illuminati confirmed numbers.
Oh no!
Wait, that's probably all of them, isn't it? So it's just any number you mentioned. There's a YouTuber out there
because of numerology, right?
That's right. Yeah. All right, so let's see. I'll take WesBlaze's age divided by 2.
My age, so I'm 30.
We'll take your age divided by 2.
Which is now 17 and a half.
And then we're multiply it by 4. So now we got 56, and then divide that by 2. So 34, number 34.
Number 34 is Bob Cleveland. Bob Cleveland, that's right. Yep.
Hey, look at that, Bob Cleveland.
Bob is always, him and his wife both, they are such huge supporters of the show. They're always commenting. We love you guys, and I'm so thrilled to know that you've won the grand prize here. So we got that coming on the way for you. I got your address here. Expect that in the mail soon.
Congratulations, guys. Awesome.
Congrats. I forgot that drum roll, but no worries. We got one other one. And hey, real quick, if I sent you a link, would you be able to pull it up on the share screen?
Sure.
I don't know if it'll have the names loaded in it, though, honestly. So here's what I'm probably going to do, just for the sake of time. I'm going to go ahead and spin this wheel here that I've loaded. I've now I've loaded all the names. Now, there were only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 entries for this. What is it, like the door prize? It's like a consolidation prize for it. We wanted to do for people that weren't a member of the Patreon, right? We want to show some continued love and do another prize. And this prize is going to be a single item that is off of our Teespring store. So you may notice in the description and the links in the description of this video, as well as other videos that we've done, there's always a link to our Teespring store. I'd like to offer any one of the shirts, maybe even a hoodie if you prefer. There's several different kinds of items on there, right? There's these mugs kind of thing that have images on them that y'all could get. And I want to offer any one item to the winner of this one. So out of these 10 comments, now the instructions were to comment on the last Uncommon Ground episode that we did in the comments and tell us what your favorite episode was. And so I'm going to spin this wheel here. Everybody can see it. And I'm going to tell you what it lands on. Ready?
Will. Oh, Uncommon Ground.
Who do we land on?
Is that Ezekiel's will?
Keenan's crazy sister.
Oh, nice. It's not showing. It's blue. It's green screening.
It's not a no phoneme. Yeah, no, you can't really see it. So Keenan's crazy sister is the winner on this one. And what did Keenan's crazy sister say? I believe she said that her
something
favorite.
Crazy?
Yeah, maybe so. She said her favorite episode. Let's read that comment real quick if I could. I wish you'd be able to pull it up. I should have made I couldn't make a slide for it if I didn't know. But here's Keenan.
Did you send it to me?
No, I didn't. I didn't know. I just picked the winner, so I couldn't have. I'm being silly. But Keenan's crazy sister, she made a couple comments. She says, love the meld of musical style. And then here it is. She said, I'd say my favorite episode so far has been number 10, The Lesser Light. I watched it about the time the moon was being crazy, and it's something I have yet to figure it out. So yeah, it was a little crazy of a comment, Keenan's crazy sister. But you are the winner. I hope to get in touch with you if you'd like to comment, an email, or a way to get in touch with you. I'd like to be able to reach out to you because I'm not sure who you might be on Facebook or nonetheless, but let's work out a way to get in contact. What's our email address, Sean?
It is Uncommon Ground Show email at Gmail. In fact, I'll tell you what, nope, that's not it. Hang on. Let me put it on screen for everybody.
Cool. If you would, I appreciate that. Uncommon Ground Show email. It's a long one at gmail.com. That way, Miss Keenan's crazy sister, if you're watching, you don't have any time limit to get back to us, and I'll make sure you are able to get that prize that you would like. You select your own choice, and I'll get that to you. But congratulations.
Right. Awesome.
That's right. Good times. I love doing this because, man, y'all have just been so kind and such a blessing to us. I just want to give back in any chance I can.
Faux show. And then I think we already showed these, but let me see here. Those the ZZs right. and the USB you're talking about.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, here's some. I love this shirt. Yeah. So a reason that I wanted to get this shirt out there is because it is an amazing way to where not only can you incorporate what you've learned from what we've put forth and presented in our show all the way back from episode 1, but you can now use this image as you wear it as a walking, talking demonstration and illustration of the gospel of the kingdom, because you can go and tell people, yeah, the Father lives here. He's got this kingdom prepared for us in the third heaven. And that's at the appointed time, it's going to come down, and everybody who's down here in Sheol, that's where they're awaiting the resurrection and the judgment. They are then the righteous people are raised up into the kingdom as it comes down, and you can just illustrate it all for them as you point out each individual topic and subject and characteristic of the creation. So that's all available for you guys. You can go and get that at the Teespring store. Again, link in description. Awesome.
If you go to the next slide, there's
just like a walking pamphlet. It's like a walking track.
That's right. Yep. And so we got the illustrated Bibles tee. Here's another one I made on the right side. I just recently made it. They're lying to hide God, and it's got kind of the 8-bit theme of like an old video game. You got some 8-bit heliocentric solar systems down there with the question marks around it. Like, where's God in this? Well, he's not in there.
I love that. In fact, if someone in the crowd's good with animation, just animate that shirt where Pac-Man's coming through.
Yes.
That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, y'all check out those. Those are all available for, if you just won the t-shirt, you can choose from any of those, as well as if you didn't get to win this time, stay tuned with us because there's bound to be more giveaways in the future. I look forward to it.
Cool. Awesome, brother.
That's right. So that being said, we got an introduction in the Uncommon Ground style that we do. If you would play the trailer teaser for this show, please, sir.
Here we are, guys. Episode 32.
Hey, my name is Tristan, and I'm in second grade, and I asked my teacher to show me an experiment where water curves. She couldn't do it because it doesn't curve. The water always finds the water. Always finds the water. Always finds the water. Always finds the water. this about? What?
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther.
In a world where our culture's basic understandings of words have become so ambiguous and subjective that a chunk of society cannot even properly define what a woman is, we here at Uncommon Ground propose that we normalize using words according to their definitions. So let's define our terms, shall we? Right? Tonight's episode is titled The Coriolis Defect. A play on words, of course, but by defect, what do we mean, Sean?
It's an imperfect or abnormality that impairs quality, function, or utility.
That is the definition according to Merriam-Webster since 1828. Yeah, that's a popular modern English definition for the word. So, yeah, the Coriolis effect, which we'll be talking about tonight, I would say is more of a defect than an effect.
That's right.
It's but even according to the next definition of the verb form, which says to forsake one cause, party, or nation for another, often because of a change in ideology. And the teachings that come with the Coriolis effect teaching definitely is an ideology that causes people to forsake a party and a nation. You know, technically, in some ways, the nation of Israel gets rejected and forsaken, and they leave that one for another one. A religion of scientism, we often call it, right?
That's right.
So, if you would read what is just Google if you were to search Coriolis effect, how does it define it?
It tries to define it as an effect whereby a mass moving in a rotating system experiences a force and acting perpendicular to the direction of motion and to the axis of rotation. On the Earth, the effect tends to deflect moving objects to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere, and is important in the information of cyclonic weather systems.
Okay,
that's right. We need a BS alarm. You know, what I'm
I know. That's what I'm saying.
We hit a.
So
watch
definitely
out for the
poop, because it's ambiguous in all these subtle ways. The way they try to define it, you know. But by first saying a mass moving in a rotating system, it doesn't. You know, in this basic definition here, they don't go into how there's two separate frames of reference here. And we'll explain a little bit more about it in a second. But on the Earth, the effect tends to deflect moving objects to the right in the northern hemisphere. Based on what perspective? Based on somebody facing what direction is it then to the right? I guess in all of them.
The one that all the printed maps are on.
Yeah. From an outsider's perspective, from the inertial reference plane, maybe. It's a little ambiguous, so I'd like to kind of dig in more if we could. What else?
It is ambiguous, isn't it?
What is
the fact that that they have to tell you that it's acting perpendicular to the direction of motion to the axis of rotation. But you're saying, okay, so for those of you who don't understand simplicity, this is why they don't teach this stuff in school, by the way, is because this is lawyer speak. This is them, instead of describing something simply, saying, well, in a heliocentric model, the globe is spinning in an eastern direction, so therefore any wind force is going to be affected to the opposite direction, depending upon where it is on that ball. They have to use all these lawyer speak words that it doesn't paint a clear picture in your mind.
It has these assumptions deep, right, like already built into what the words they're using without explaining those assumptions.
Yeah. And so the average person is just told, it's almost like trying to intimidate them with something that sounds impressive, but really you break it down at simplest level, it's not impressive at all.
And we will see why here. So Merriam-Webster also has something to say to chime in on the definition of the Coriolis of force that has been, established and dictated by men. Because so far we've looked at definition of Coriolis effect. So if you notice, we go back one slide. Did it say?
Yeah, it was a force that is created by the effect.
It does say there's the Coriolis force there in parentheses. Yeah. So now it's bringing up a force that's somehow maybe different from the effect. So Merriam-Webster says the Coriolis force is an apparent force, right? That as a result of the Earth's rotation deflects moving objects such as projectiles or air currents to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. But so that's exactly what the effect just said.
It
So
is.
apparently
It is.
the effect and the force are somehow synonymous.
Yeah,
Let's
and so and of course it all is on the assumption that the initiation of the force is the spinning of the globular model inside of the vacuum, where there's a barrier between the actual surface of the spinning object and the vacuum, which is the weather patterns that are then affected and creates the force that you see.
you're
So
hitting on
yeah, so basically it's just gobbledygook. But this is obviously within their model. This is what they try to explain to say that this is a thing. But I think the thing we're going to be trying to test tonight, Wes, is we're not trying to teach people the heliocentric model, right? But we're trying to say this is what they believe, and is it observable? Is it real? And is there any testimony to its validity? And then, of course, does it even line up at all with everything that we've already shown and presented on what God says He made this place to be?
That's right. Yeah. Not a lot of scripture tonight. I look forward to getting back to more scripture in depth, but we just gotta kind of debunk some of the lies told tonight, right? So Sean just hinted on something where you said there's this imaginary barrier, basically, with the atmosphere between the vacuum of space and the rotating, allegedly, surface of the Earth. Well, that would mean that there's a inertial reference frame of the rotating Earth being different from the atmosphere. Whereas if you were to ask, most science teachers or heliocentrists in large, if you were to ask them, how come the Earth doesn't spin under my feet if I just jump up? I can jump pretty high. If I were to jump as high as I can, or even if I just jumped off of something really tall, how come I don't land, based on the spin of the Earth having spun underneath my feet? They're going to tell you, oh, because it's just like if you're in a car and you throw something up and you catch it, the atmosphere in the car is moving along with you. So they're going to tell you that the atmosphere of the Earth is moving along with the spin of the Earth, which is why the Earth doesn't move under your feet if you jump over it. But the Coriolis effect assumes that it doesn't. The Coriolis effect is a thing because they're saying the atmosphere does not move at the same speed, at least with the rotation of the Earth, that it's a separate reference point and the inertial reference point instead of the rotating one.
It's very frustrating, the double speak, right?
It is,
Which is like, you're like, okay, so a helicopter is hovering 20 feet above the ground. Why doesn't the ground move underneath it? Oh, it's because the atmosphere is moving with the spinning Earth. You're like, okay, so cool. But then,
so there's no Coriolis.
So then there's no Coriolis. So like, so then how, like, but suddenly, the 2015 playoff kick, it hit the goalpost because of Coriolis.
that was a point I didn't even include in here tonight. It's just so
16-ounce ball from 35 yards away just immediately has Coriolis all over it. So
it's absolutely ridiculous.
So much double think.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see. What does science.howstuffworks.com say? If you would read this one, Sean.
Sure. It says sometimes the Coriolis effect is called the Coriolis force. The reason is simple. In causing an object to accelerate, it appears to change the direction of that object. However, the Coriolis force isn't a typical force like a push or a pull. Wow, that sounds like a magical magnetism. The effect is actually based on the observer's perspective. Wow, that sounds like Einsteinian relativity. A force isn't really acting on the object to make it go off course. It merely, I guess wind resistance has nothing to do with this. It merely appears to curve because of the Earth's movement underneath it. Oh, so they're directly telling you because the Earth is spinning that's why this. So basically, the thing that you threw, or the bullet, the high speed airplane that travels faster than a bullet, or as fast as a bullet. So you're trying to say that is moving. The Earth is spinning underneath it, and that's the only reason why the observer thinks that the airplane's moving. So really, it's the ball Earth and the observer standing on it are what's moving, and the plane is standing still in motion and in time as a fixed point in space. Is that what I'm to believe? Kind of, right?
Kind of one of the things they would lead you to suggest. Yeah.
So to a person standing outside the rotating frame of reference, the object still moves in a straight line. So if I were hovering in space outside the globe and I saw a plane flying over Australia, I would see it flying in a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's because you're on the merry-go-round, you don't see it that way. And
but I forgot the atmosphere extends out to the moon now, apparently. So I would be moving with it. So never mind.
It's so silly, right? Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
Since the so-called Coriolis force doesn't actually act on the object to alter its course. Let me read that again. Since the so-called Coriolis force doesn't actually act on the object to alter its course, some people argue that it's more accurate to continue calling it the Coriolis effect. Why would they call it the Coriolis observation? But
Or
either way, others differentiate between the Coriolis force and other actual forces by categorizing it as an inertial or fictitious force.
one more time, they call it, some argue that it's not a real force at all, just like science.how stuff works said above, that it's not a typical force like a push or a pull. A force isn't really acting on the object, but it's the Coriolis force. It's a force, but it's not a force, they say. So this is the doublespeak again. And then they say, because of this fact, others argue that it's a fictitious force. We know what fictitious means, not, real, not actual.
Maybe what if we inserted a little bit of a biblical description from 1st century AD into this last sentence?
Please do.
Others differentiate between the Coriolis force and other actual forces by categorizing it as an inertial or science falsely so-called force.
Yeah, there you go.
Would that work?
Timothy. Yep, it would in reality. So we have Gaspard Gustave de Coriolis from 1792 to 1843 is when he lived. And he was a French mathematician, some say a physicist, but other sources will tell you he was a civil and mechanical engineer. And we were talking about backstage how a civil engineer is often somebody that works on, sewage systems and things for a city, right? So I don't know exactly specifically what he did, but that's ironic considering that toilet bowls and the drains of a flush from a toilet has been attributed to this effect, aka force, aka fictitious force, that has been attributed to this guy's work. But he was best known for his work on the supplementary forces that are detected in a rotating frame of reference, leading to the Coriolis effect. So it's almost as if people took his work and then, it led to them applying it to the globe model in heliocentrism.
Interesting.
But let's see what else.
18th century physicist and mathematician is basically, and this is interesting because this gets into that same area of his lifespan where they were starting to flesh out more and more of the heliocentric model in relationship to moving away from Principia, from Newton, right? Newtonian physics, right? And going into other ideas and exploring other concepts because they were seeing an ether problem. They were seeing all these issues within
even Newton, when he proposed a lot of the things he proposed, he said, I'm not confident in this, basically.
That's right.
To paraphrase.
That's right. And so this is that intermediate time between Newton and actual Einstein where they made a full-on switch in the whole industry, if you will, of academia to try to push this idea of a fixed point of relevance, so that things are moving around you versus. So this, to me, it's interesting that this seems to be like, even though on a smaller scale, because they have tried to apply Einsteinian relativity to the larger scale of the void of space from their model. This seems like on a much smaller level that you can then use as a springboard towards going into Einsteinian relativity, because you're already doing the basic premise of this, which is if you're standing looking at something and something's moving away from you, well, if it's touching the ground, then that means it's not really moving away from you in a curved direction. It's just that you're moving away from it in a curved direction. So it gets the mind to try to think that to inverse itself, to think opposite of your natural observation.
Yes.
And that is, I think, what we've talked about on multiple shows here seems to be the philosophical deception of all this, of the entire heliocentric model.
Ignore your perspective, your actual, what you observe, and listen to what we say. What were you going to say? Which is to...
No, you just said it for me. That's great. Yeah. Is they want you to not trust your own senses and believe what they tell you. It's really sad.
Yes, sir. But it goes on here, Gustav,
Oh, I think he cut out a little bit. He had some internet troubles earlier, so I'll keep going here for a minute and see if he can pick back up. So here, same guy, it's Coriolis, the original. He tried to say an assistant professor of analysis and mechanics at the École Polytechnique of Paris in 1816, 1838. He introduced the terms work and kinetic energy in their modern scientific meanings in his first major book titled On the Calculation of Mechanical Action. And that was something he published in 1829, in which he attempted to adapt theoretical principles to applied mechanics. So as always, guys, the theoretical principles concept is what gets us in trouble, right? The theoretical concept. This is what, Tesla wrote a scathing review of modern scientists in his day in the early 20th century, talking about how they continually push these thought experiments, basically, of these theoretical principles, that they're doing theoretical calculations to where they just lose touch with reality themselves. And so this is what astrophysics is. This guy was a physicist, but yet he's speaking about modern physics on the ground, and he's already stepping into that mindset, away from believing your own senses into, well, what if we turned everything backwards and then we had a theoretical principle applied to mechanics. So this is where it gets interesting, because he's not just dealing with things he can't see, like astrophysicists who cannot actually observe, the stars or whatever they claim that, they claim that they're light years away. They can't actually go there, measure them, truly observe them. They just always work off of little light shifts and what they call trigonometric parallax, which is, highly debated in itself. But this guy back in the day is still working with raw things. So he's not he's not an astronomy amateur. He is a physicist and mathematician. He's trying to work with raw principles. He's trying to say, all right, is there a way to actually observe with a theoretical principle these applied mechanics? And he tried to put this into that book that we're looking at here. So this is the origins of the Coriolis concept. And as we just tried to show you, it's based on theoretical concepts. So guys, just in case you're not familiar, Wes is going to jump back on here in just a minute. So I just want to hopefully give you a little summary to say, when you're looking at scientific ideas, you want to be very, very close. You want to pay close attention to when people say, this is a theory, or this was proposed, or this was hypothetical, right? Because the scientific method is supposed to be something you can demonstrate, observe, reproduce at its simplest core. But even that method got added to over time with all this different variances of hypothesis testing, versus the idea of, do I actually see it? Okay, I'm going to try to replicate it, demonstrate it, see if I can make it work according to what I'm observing. A theoretical physicist is someone who takes theoretical ideas. This is thought experiments. This is his imagination. And he says, what if this was real and that was real, and I put them together, how would they work? That's how the Coriolis started. It did not start on human observation, because human observation, as we're going to talk about in greater depth as we keep going, will not let you come to the conclusion that there is some force that is poorly defined and contradictory explained by even academia itself, that's pushing him acting like it's pushing and pulling, but not really pushing and pulling. It's actually very much strangely undefined, almost as strangely undefined as the Force in Star Wars. So yeah, I took us all the way to spaghetti Western Star Wars.
Thank you, brother.
Yes.
I'm so
because,
sorry.
I mean, we were talking about theoretical physics, right? So,
Yep. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's where it leads to. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's never an Uncommon Ground show unless some sort of technical difficulties. But
now, did you have anything else to say on this? I kind of elaborated
I didn't. You did
the theoretical principles part.
You did wonderfully. Hey, is my sound and quality okay back? Okay, good deal.
Yeah, you're good. You're back.
Thank you. Yeah, you did excellent. And the Coriolis effect assumes, this is something we touched on just a minute ago, but I wanted to kind of help illustrate it and bullet point it out, that it assumes the Earth is a globe. It assumes this globe Earth spins. And it also assumes that the atmosphere does not spin with the Earth or at the same speed. So just to reiterate that for you guys, they will tell you left and right that the atmosphere spins along with the Earth, and that's why it doesn't rotate under your feet if you jump, or a helicopter when it's flying, or a hot air balloon when it's in flight. But then they'll also tell you that as soon as something leaves the rotating Earth, if it leaves the surface of the Earth, then it's now in this different reference frame where it's not being affected by the spin of the Earth, and it's in the atmosphere, which is somehow not spinning with the Earth. So It's silly, because I had a quote here that I wanted to read that goes along with that, and it says, globe believers. No, it's not. I'm just going to read it. Globe believers often claim that gravity magically and inexplicably drags the entire lower atmosphere of the Earth in perfect synchronization up to some undetermined height, where the progressively faster spinning atmosphere eventually gives way to the non-spinning, non-gravitized, non-atmosphere of the infinite vacuum of space. Such nonsensical theories are debunked, however, by rain, fireworks, birds, bugs, clouds, smoke, planes, projectiles, all of which would behave very differently if both the ball Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastward at over 1,000 miles per hour.
Yep. And, any basic astronomer who's living in northern Brazil or Peru, in the southern and South American hemisphere, I should say planisphere. Because they would be on the picture you see on screen. they would get to the place where this strange force affects the south different than the north. So what is there an equilibrium point where they claim none of this affects anything?
There is actually, yeah.
Oh,
That's the
nice.
equator. They say that there is no Coriolis at the point which is spinning allegedly
The
fastest.
fastest. That's
They
right.
say there is no Coriolis. And then some sources, we'll get to the sniper thing in a little while, but some sources say that snipers don't have to account for the Coriolis if they're shooting north to south, which still makes no sense. So no Coriolis at the equator, no Coriolis, according to some sources, north and south. But east, if you're shooting east and west and something moving east to west, then there's Coriolis. It's so subjective and selective.
So wait a minute. If I'm at the equator, they claim that if I shoot east to west, then there's no Coriolis. But if I pointed my gun towards the north, would I get
Suddenly then
Coriolis?
that's well, it depends who you ask, really, honestly.
Okay.
Yep. So we got a clip here to help us illustrate. If you would play the "What is Coriolis" clip. Do you have that one?
For sure, yeah.
Before we get to the Simpsons. Let's elicit the help of.
So what is the Coriolis effect? Well, it's what happens when objects moving in a straight line appear to curve because you are rotating. Right now, it seems like the ball's curving, but let's take a look at what's really happening. My friends and I put together this little experiment using a sort of spinning seesaw. Here, the camera's standing still. It's just hanging from the ceiling. And watch what happens. From the moment the ball leaves my hand, it's just going straight. Let's watch that again, frame by frame. Keep your eye on the ball. You can see it travels in a perfectly straight line. But what if you're spinning with the seesaw? Look at what happens when you rotate the footage so the seesaw stays sideways and everything moves around it. Now let's follow the path of the ball again, but from this new perspective. The trajectory looks completely different. Now let's watch this one frame by frame. From this rotating perspective, it totally looks like the ball is curving. That's crazy because you already saw that exact same throw. Watch it again on the left. The ball is going straight. But on the right, when you're rotating with the seesaw, the ball really looks like it's curving.
But wait, what is the Coriolis effect? There are two constituent parts. The first being a rotating reference frame. In this assertion, the globe rotates. The second part being the inertial reference frame, which is everything not attached to the rotating reference frame. This can be demonstrated better by a drone on a roundabout. The drone leaves the roundabout of the rotating reference frame and enters the inertial reference frame. From the rotating reference frame, it appears that the drone is deviating movement, but we can see that the drone is not moving at all. It's the rotating reference frame of the roundabout moving underneath the drone. An apparent deviation. The two reference frames, highlighted by the green, the rotating reference frame, and the red is everything not attached to the rotating reference frame, the inertial reference frame. So every observation from the rotating reference frame is Coriolis, an apparent deviation. But from the observation of the inertial reference frame, if something is moving, this is not Coriolis. This is an actual deviation. So to observe Coriolis, we need to be attached to the rotating reference frame, and we need something to leave the rotating reference frame into the inertial reference frame, like this drone. It appears to deviate, but it's not moving at all. So if we actually live on the asserted rotating globe, that means everything that leaves the rotating reference frame should appear to deviate, because it's in the inertial reference frame. But these hot air balloons are moving in every direction possible, kind of behaving like gas particles, moving freely and randomly in all directions. If it is asserted that the Earth rotates to the east, then everything in the inertial reference frame should deviate to the west. But that's not what we observe in reality. Let's look at other things in the inertial reference frame, like helicopters. They hover for hours in the air, and the Earth should be rotating underneath. They should be experiencing a deviation to the west. But as we can see with this helicopter, it can make precision movements, which is used to stand this high voltage tower. But once again, in reality, we never see this helicopter deviate to the west, which should happen if Earth were actually rotating to the east. Everything in the inertial reference frame should be experiencing a 15 degree per hour deviation to the west. So here's another drone demonstration. This is put into ATTI mode, which is attitude mode, not governed by GPS. This is a 20-minute time lapse of the drone hovering and not deviating to the west. In fact, it's not deviating at all. It's landing almost exactly from where it took off from 20 minutes ago. The drone is in the inertial reference frame, so if the Earth were actually spinning underneath it, it would observe an actual deviation, which is what we observe in hurricanes, cyclones, and tornadoes. We view these things in the inertial reference frame, just like this drone. The rotating reference frame is actually spinning underneath it, just like hurricanes, cyclones, and tornadoes. They are actually spinning. This is not Coriolis ballers. This is an actual rotation of something, and it's not the globe. And this is not Coriolis. This is an actual rotation of something, an actual force seen in both reference frames. So if we never observe Coriolis in balloons, in helicopters, and in drones, where can we observe Earth-based Coriolis?
We can't. We can't observe it based on an imaginary rotation of the Earth that is not rotating.
That's
love,
right.
love that guy's accent. I appreciate his help illustrating some of it. The drone experiment was awesome, right? Depending on where he was, you know, in relation to the equator and the poles, the Earth would be spinning anywhere from 200, 400 to 1,000 plus miles per hour. And even in just a 20-minute time lapse like that, there should have been quite a bit of significant difference between where the drone where it started and where it finished. But there wasn't, because the Earth doesn't move underneath it. Therefore, there's no Coriolis effect.
That's right. And that's kind of synonymous with what we see in the scriptures, right? As David spoke of in Psalm 93:1, the Lord reigns, he's clothed himself with honor. The Lord is clothed and girded himself with strength, for he has established the world which shall not be moved. Now, I know I can hear it now, Wes. I can hear the naysayers now. And they'll say,
Poetry.
well, Sean, yeah, this is poetic language. This is a psalm. He's established the world, meaning he created all things, and they will not be uncreated. That's what they would try to say. It shall not be moved. Yet there are other verses that talk about how he created the foundations of the earth, the pillars of the earth, the land that he established the world. It shall not be moved. This is not the only one. I think Psalm 104 also goes into it as well.
It does. 104 verse 5 says he set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. If that were poetic, it would be using inaccurate terms to describe the creation that God said he created. And I can't get down with that.
Recently, I even heard a pastor, a well-known pastor, actually, he tried to talk about how, this type of poetic language, speaking about, the common verses that YouTubers who are proponents of FE that they use to support from scripture, this idea. And he talks about the foundations of the earth and things like that. And he was trying to say, oh, this is just I'm paraphrasing without giving his whole speech, but he was trying to explain it away by saying, oh, the references to the foundations of the earth, which people who believe in biblical cosmology will use to talk about a non-spinning earth. That just is a reference to the kingdoms of the earth, of the pillars of the earth, the pillars of men that he's raised up within a kingdom that will be established and not moved. So even if we were to take the verse you just read, that these were pillars referring to people of righteousness or people of steadfastness within a world, within a nation, within some sort of thing that he established, which will never be moved, that we've never seen in all of history.
No. And if
even
the words
Israel
mean
itself.
Right. And if the words mean what they say, then it says he set the earth on those men. If we're going to interpret that way,
this is what he'll also say the land, reinterpret it to say, well, the word haaretz in the Hebrew doesn't just mean the entire earth. It also means land. And I actually agree with that there's some context there about how haaretz is used in what setting, but you're exactly right. In the setting you just mentioned, he set the land on people, and that's what he would say. Oh, it must be talking about the nation of Israel, as those righteous, steadfast people were a part of this land, the nation of Israel, that will not be moved. But still, that has never happened. And this is a past tense statement. So this is not, we have a unique perspective here at this point in history where we can look back at the entirety of the biblical account where the children of Israel from the Exodus were brought into a land and made their own nation, to which they failed badly and were rejected and scattered out of that nation. It was moved. So the metaphor doesn't even work. You know what I'm saying?
No, agreed.
Yeah.
It said it shall never be moved. And so they were dispersed, right?
Yes.
Into dispersion. You're right.
Yeah.
Hey, just real quick, big thank you to Kindig, as well as Chase Sepulvado. You both are very appreciated for the super chats.
Thank you,
for your
yes.
contribution and support. We love you for it. But there's lots of other scripture. I really want to recommend my girlfriend's channel. She's got Wildly Unpopular, one word. Type that into YouTube and find her video called The Pillars of the Earth, right? It's Flat Jack, I believe, is the subtitle. And if y'all check that, she does a great job breaking down some of the Hebrew words, like how the foundations and the pillars, it said when they were laid, the Hebrew word means sunk, as into water. And there's so many fascinating things she covered in that video. I really recommend it, as well as we have covered the scriptures extensively, like in first season of the show in episode 2, Geocentricity, No Sphericity. Really recommend checking that one out if you haven't seen it yet, so that you get a better understanding for what the scriptures say about how the earth doesn't move.
That's right. Almost as if it was created in and out of water, like Peter says.
Exactly.
It would need pillars that were sunk in the water to support it.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a little thing here from The Simpsons.
It is. So in 1995, right, this 1995 episode of The Simpsons, Lisa convinces a skeptical Bart that drains in the northern hemisphere always empty to the left, counterclockwise, and those in the southern hemisphere always empty to the right, clockwise. If you go to the next slide here, that was episode 16 of season 6. So it's 1995. This is one of the ways that the media machine has propagated this lie, right? They slide it into different facets of media and TV shows and things, so that they can help propagate the idea of this lie that the earth spins and there's a Coriolis effect. So he goes on.
You keep using that word propagate. Do you mean indoctrinate?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
They propagate the indoctrination. Absolutely.
That's
So this causes Bart to rack up a bunch of money and charges for collect calls, because he calls all these countries in the so-called southern hemisphere to ask them what direction their toilets spin. If you go to the next slide. Eventually he gets in trouble with the Australian government, and all sorts of shenanigans ensue because he's on this mission to try to prove Lisa wrong. And Lisa just states it so matter-of-factly, as if this is scientific truth, that drains and toilets always spin one significant direction, one, counterclockwise in the north and clockwise in the south. And we can observe through firsthand observation and experimentation of looking at toilets, which is this is what they want you to do to try to prove that the earth spins. They have to turn you to looking down in a toilet,
right.
which doesn't even consistently follow their narrative. So what's the next slide here? So this is science.how stuff works again. Would you read what they had to say?
Sure. While the premise makes sense that the Earth's eastward spin would cause the water in a toilet bowl to spin as well, in reality, the force and speed at which the water enters and leaves the receptacle is much too great to be influenced by something as minuscule as a single 360-degree turn over the span of a day. When all is said and done, the Coriolis effect plays no larger role in toilet flushes and baseball games than it does in the revolution of CDs in your stereo. The things that really determine the direction in which water leaves your toilet or sink are the shape of the bowl and the angle at which the liquid initially enters that bowl.
So, according to this mainstream, scientific institution that teaches people heliocentric globe science, they say that's been debunked. This idea that toilet bowls always flush in the same direction, depending on which hemisphere you're in, and that they spin in opposite directions.
So
they say that's false.
I'm just having an epiphany here. Wait a minute. So if it's the point of the observer is the Coriolis is happening at this point. So basically, I can use this as an excuse for why I don't hit the bowl when I pee.
If you sprinkle when you tinkle, please be neat and wipe that.
Just playing, guys. I hit the bowl.
Okay, good. Anyways, so yeah, these guys are saying nope, that's a lie. So Matt Groening, who writes and created The Simpsons over there, who is a Freemason, says that through Lisa, the agency of Lisa, he's delivered this lie, and now here's science.how stuff works, describing how that is not accurate at all, and that's not a proof of the Earth's spin, because It's not consistent. What else? I think we got another mainstream institution here. National Geographic. Surely you've heard of them. They say, despite the popular urban legend, you cannot observe the Coriolis effect by watching a toilet flush or a swimming pool drain. The movement of fluids in these basins is dependent on manufacturer's design or outside forces, such as a strong breeze. Obviously, hopefully your toilet's not being flushed outside, subject to winds. If it is, that's more likely to affect the flush than the Coriolis effect.
That strong breeze isn't from the winds. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Silly. Yep. Go with the flow, boys. Right. You got these little water particles just saying there's a flow here, but it's not been, affected by an alleged imaginary spin of the earth. So National Geographic also concurs that that's a farce. But we got another clip here. And so, some say the Coriolis effect causes all toilets to flush the same way in a single hemisphere, but it cannot even make these two whirlpools right next to each other spin the same way. Let's show them what that looks like. And this is a natural phenomenon that can be seen. You can even have two sinks right next to each other, depending on how the water comes in and the direction and the force of the water. It's the two sinks right next to each other can spin opposite ways in the same hemisphere.
Wes, was this one named Coriolis Storms?
No, it's a whirlpool.
I didn't get that one.
2 seconds. Yeah. Oh, no, you're right. I didn't send it to you. That's my bad. So while we're pulling that up, I can do that real quickly. Are you able to load it up quickly, or should we skip it?
No, we can do it quick.
Okay. Here it comes. There it is. UG32 whirlpools. Just a real quick clip, about a minute long, just to show you a first-hand real-world observation of water draining in separate directions right next to each other. For what it's worth.
All right, almost.
Good deal. Thank you, Cat Lady Forever, for being here. Beetlejuice is here. Miss Lisa Mendez, much love to you. GR Cleve is here. I hope y'all if you missed the beginning of the episode, y'all did win. You and Bob. It was Bob specifically. His name was listed. Y'all won our Patreon giveaway. Tyler Porter, thanks for being here. Rich P, thanks again. Eye on the prize is here. Yakov Natsarim, much love to you all.
Okay, 1 second here. We're almost ready.
Country Dad, I saw your message here. Yeah, I can get with you. Comment on any one of my posts, and I'll respond to you so that you can make that happen if that's a way you'd like to encourage and contribute us, brother. We appreciate you.
Here we go.
Let's do it. Whirlpool.
Been a bit of rain last night. In the big field. And two very serious whirlpools happening this year.
Man, that's fantastic.
There you have it. Thanks for getting that loaded up. It's my bad for not having it ready, but yeah,
it's a great clip. So obvious.
Yeah, obviously, the Coriolis effect makes toilets flow the same way in every in both of the so-called hemispheres. It can't even make these two whirlpools right next to each other spin the same way. Just to reiterate, like there's proof. Now
and those were large toilet sized. So
yeah, Nephilim toilets.
That's right.
So speaking of Nephilim, we'll have an episode in this season upcoming here in a couple months. We'll do an episode on the giants and the Nephilim. So y'all look forward to that. That'll be exciting stuff. Part of the creation that was not intended to be created.
Oh, here's this guy, meme master.
Right. Just a little meme here, right? this guy is is famous for being in memes where people make fun of things, but in all good taste, this guy watches toilet flush and concludes Earth is a globe. Just like I was saying earlier, that one of their go-to proofs to prove that the Earth is spinning is look in your toilet. Look where you dump your excrement. That's how you can prove the Earth spins. It's so ridiculous.
I mean, it's probably. I mean, this is coming from the same people that have been encouraging you to learn how to drink your own pee because they do it on the ISS, supposedly. You know what I'm saying? So I should say, filter your own pee to drink it. So this is
it's like, it's just one of those kind of rubbing it in your face, I feel like, where they're like, if you want to know it's BS, we'll tell you to look where you put the S to, to determine what is actually happening here. So
look where you BSing.
Yeah. BS. So we got these experiments, so-called, right? We have really what don't amount to anything more than a sideshow gimmick, parlor show hoax of a smoke and mirrors trick that they do, and it's very popular to do at the equator. So there's a couple videos that kind of have gone viral that are allegedly proof, right, of the Earth's spin, where this person who's entertaining tourists and hoping to get a tip from the tourists will take them to 3 separate basins. And there was a clip of this in our teaser trailer for this episode that we played earlier, where you saw somebody dumping water into a circular basin. There is a drain, and their intent is to show you, look, the water's draining this way when we step over here on this side of the equator. At the equator, the water just goes straight down because there's no Coriolis at the equator. And then over here on the other side of the equator, the water spins the other way. Proof the Earth is the globe, right? Or that it spins. But you can even see, if you go to the next slide, I've pointed out here, where the water is being dumped. According to the perspective of the people watching, relative to the direction they're pouring the water, it's being dumped in a way that facilitates the water to circulate in a certain direction, meaning they are forcing it by not even the shape of the basin. That's not even necessary. They just pour it on one side towards a certain direction to get it to spin the way that they to produce the effect they want to produce, which is fraudulent. It's not. What they say is happening isn't really happening because they're making it happen.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. But it's like tourists, that the guys that are always trying tourists out of their money. They're in every country. It's we call them. Anyway, I'll save that joke for later. Anyway, so
there's one more here.
There's one more here.
You can see the same effect being produced because of the direction and the angle that this gentleman is pouring the water in.
Yep.
And it's hard to say he's a gentleman when he's deceiving people intentionally. And
using a paper plate with the classic hypnosis swirls on it. Like, how hilarious is that? Yeah.
Isn't that ironic? Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of hypnosis swirls.
Yeah. So they tell you that, okay, Coriolis effect, let's say, okay, it doesn't affect drains and sinks and whirlpools. We just proved that. But they do try to tell you that it will affect storm cells and circular patterns of winds and like tropical cyclones, which is another name for hurricanes. And so, but then they'll tell you there's such a thing as a cyclonic cyclone, and then there's an anticyclonic cyclone, which means, so a cyclonic cyclone, like a hurricane, cyclonic would mean that it spins the way it's supposed to based on what they've decided the Coriolis effect does to these hurricanes. Cyclonic means that in the northern hemisphere, it spins counterclockwise. Anticyclonic means that in the northern hemisphere, it spins clockwise.
When they think it should all spin counterclockwise.
Right. So just the fact that an anticyclonic cyclone exists means they don't always spin in the same direction in the hemisphere that they're saying it spins in. So
but instead of that being the observation by which they say, okay, so then our theory of applied mechanics, philosophical theory of Coriolis is not observable, let's scrap that and start over. They just keep pushing Coriolis, even though there's literal observable evidence to the opposite.
Right. It's just what does a liar do when they kind of get caught along the way in one of their lies? They just lie more to cover it up. They
vote more money to be spent by the Democrats. I mean, they double down. Sorry.
Yeah. Or any of the
Right.
Political parties.
The rhinos
people
as
that are
well. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the rhinos. The people that are in control of the political parties, right? So hurricanes are said to always spin certain directions in the two hemispheres, except when they don't. That's why there's a term called anticyclonic, meaning it doesn't always spin the way they say they do. And there usually are high and low pressure. Now, a high pressure anticyclone doesn't always necessarily come with the same effects that a hurricane would, of all the rains and the terrible weather. Anticyclonic is at higher pressure, which is going to be raising, whereas lower pressure is sinking airs, sinking weather patterns and stuff. But if you go to the next slide.
Interesting. It's almost like we did an entire episode about the wind and weather patterns coming out of the firmament, as explained by Enoch a couple weeks ago.
We did. Don't forget about that, guys. That was 2 episodes ago, episode 30, where we covered seasons, tides, and time zones. Y'all check that out episode. That was a great counterpart to this one. But yeah, here was from another weather website where they said winds in a cyclone blow counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. And then they define an anticyclone by saying, well, winds in an anticyclone blow clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. But it's still a system, like a storm cell, of a pattern of air either way. It's circulating air, which, you can't say, oh, it's only hurricanes that don't, they'll try to say hurricanes don't have anticyclones. Well, a hurricane is just a tropical storm cell, a tropical cyclone. And if there's a tropical anticyclone that exists, then you're talking about basically a hurricane that spins in a different way that has different effects because of the pressure involved with it.
Do they claim that the cyclonic ones, the ones that turn in opposition to what they expected?
No, cyclonic is like cyclone is the one is the way that
turn counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Anticyclone turns clockwise.
Right.
Shouldn't the speed of those be incredibly greater? The speed of an anticyclonic, because it's actually moving with the turn of the Earth, like it to some degree. I mean, is that even documented? Do they even talk about that? I don't know. Not
that I saw, but you would think so, because you're right. It would be spinning with the alleged spin of the Earth in the same direction, but it doesn't actually. The cyclone, it's opposite, as they would have you believe, because the cyclone is what has more devastating, higher wind speeds and that kind of weather and destruction that comes with it. But you can also see, if you go to the next slide, anytime a weatherman is showing you guys, they got the weather map on the screen. He's pointing at his green screen, and he'll have the H's and the L's, the highs and the lows. They'll often refer to them. Anytime they're showing you that, they're showing you cyclonic and anticyclonic wind activity, which is
just hasn't turned into a destructive storm yet, but it's still
right. So, which flies in the face of this idea that the Coriolis effect causes these wind patterns to always spin the same way. They show you every time they're on the weather,
Yeah.
It's that in your face and obvious, because it's not just high pressure and low pressure. The fact that those pressures are existing are causing a circulation, also due to the jet streams, which is something that'll be brought up here in just a minute as well. There are some winds, as we talked about it 2 episodes ago, right? And here's the clip. So they, this one website says, well, why do big storms spin? And they give another definition for the Coriolis effect. Would you read it?
The Coriolis effect is a phenomenon that causes fluids like water and air to curve as they travel across or above Earth's surface.
Which was already explained that it doesn't actually curve. It just curves from the perspective of somebody on the spinning reference frame.
Yeah. So guys, this does not explain tornadoes, which sometimes curve up into the clouds. No, it's not talking about that kind of curve. It's talking about the direction from the observer's viewpoint. But even in tornadoes, all examples of them would disprove this effect as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, because tornadoes will actually come up in this clip, and you should have this one, the Coriolis storms, whereas it'll say that, tornadoes are also a storm cell with circulating winds, and they too are not affected by the Coriolis effect, in the sense that both cyclonic and anticyclonic wind patterns in tornadoes do exist.
Yeah.
But would you play that clip? Do you have that one?
Oh, sure.
Coriolis storms.
Let me see.
We'll have somebody help us illustrate that point a little better too, so you can see that there are on
Science
record.
ABC describes this claim in further detail.
Interestingly, cyclones in the northern hemisphere of our planet spin in the counterclockwise direction, while those that occur in the southern hemisphere spin clockwise. In fact, this is true for all storms.
That is utterly false.
Tornadoes usually rotate counterclockwise, but what happens when one is spotted turning the opposite direction?
Inside Science.
A tornado is a violently rotating column of air that extends from the thunderstorm, and that's the general definition of it.
A tornado in the northern hemisphere usually spins counterclockwise, but on rare occasions it can twist clockwise and is called an anticyclonic tornado.
Well, it all started with actually video. We got a video on our TV station from a lady that lives in the neighborhood where it went through. And I said, that thing is going clockwise. And I kept looking at it, and so then finally when we had a chance to really sit down and look at it, when we're not on the air, you can see it was going clockwise.
You can also see the anticyclone here on the radar. Red indicates winds moving away from the radar, and green shows winds moving towards the radar, creating a circle.
Hi everybody, I'm Kevin Harned. Let me explain why that tornado in Henry County was so rare. We were watching these individual supercells pop up. The only tornado that's been confirmed was an EF 100-mile-an-hour winds, but the odd part about that storm was it was rotating clockwise. 98% of all tornadoes in the United States, in the northern hemisphere for that matter, rotate counterclockwise or cyclonically. This was an anticyclonic tornado. You can see that storm there.
So there's the first hole in their claim. Now let's let them continue.
This happens due to the Coriolis effect, a physical phenomenon named after the French mathematician Gaspard Gustave de Coriolis.
Wait, hold on again real quick. Let me explain this. Wikipedia illustrates the Coriolis effect on a turntable, merry-go-round, or carousel. If you were to sit on a spinning merry-go-round and have someone in the center toss a ball at you, that ball's trajectory would appear to curve. The apparent force acting on that ball, causing it to curve in the air, is called Coriolis force. And just like gravity, we can describe it, we can say what it does to other things, and we can predict things with it. However, just like gravity, the Coriolis force is an illusion and is completely imaginary. This is why both gravity and the Coriolis force are referred to as pseudo-forces, or fictitious forces in science. Concerning the Coriolis force, the truth is revealed when we step off of the merry-go-round and we see the ball move in a straight line. Alright, now I'll let them continue.
Standing at Earth's North Pole, if you were to shoot an arrow at a target in the southern direction, towards the equator, the arrow would land west of the target, as the Earth rotates from west to east. However, if you shoot an arrow from the equator at a target towards the North Pole, then the arrow would land east of the target. Similarly, in the southern hemisphere, the arrow shot from the South Pole towards the equator would land west of the target, whereas the arrow shot towards the South Pole would land east of the target. The same thing happens when winds, storms, and cyclones in the northern and southern hemispheres travel from and towards the equator. In both hemispheres, winds traveling towards the equator are diverted towards the west, while winds traveling towards the poles will curve eastward. But due to the presence of low pressure zones, these winds follow a circular path. This is why cyclones and hurricanes in the northern hemisphere spin counterclockwise, whereas those in the southern hemisphere spin clockwise.
Again, that is false. Not only because of the existence of anticyclones, but also because if you were to step off the merry-go-round, you would see the storms moving straight. The Coriolis force is also called an inertial force. Inertia is the property of matter by which it retains its state of rest or velocity along a straight line, so long as it's not acted upon by an external force. And if the Earth were actually a spinning globe, in which direction would the winds be moving? They would be moving outward like this, just like any object on a spinning merry-go-round. Yet look at the direction they claim these storms are flying. North and south? If I were to hop on a merry-go-round and spin it around really fast, do you think it would launch me upward? Nope! So if this is not caused by a spinning globe Earth, what is causing this on a stationary flat Earth? One of the vocabulary words that you should really familiarize yourself with is the term jet stream. We usually bring this up when talking about plane flights, but jet streams are just fast-moving air currents at high altitudes. These air currents can reach up to 250 miles an hour. And when those air currents meet resistance, they curl out and away from the air current, and the direction of the curl depends on which side of the current it is on. So if it's on the right side of the current, that curl will turn right. And if it's on the left side of that curl will turn left. Now, really cool website called bobwinds.com. It works in conjunction with the US National Weather Service, and it shows the wind currents throughout the world. All of these big red, pink, and white areas are the major jet streams. I've gone and zoomed in here for you so you can have a closer look. And as you look right off the coast of Alaska here, you can see this jet stream. Please notice how if you're moving with the jet stream, the wind on the right is turning clockwise, and the wind on the left is turning counterclockwise. It really isn't that rare of a thing. You can even see the same thing on a globe. This is earth.nullschool.net, a completely different website, also getting their info from the US National Weather Service. So here I'm going to go and adjust the height of the winds we are looking at. When it comes to air currents, they determine height based on pressure with a system called HPA. 1000 HPA is about sea level, and the jet streams at 250 HPA are the ones that have a lot to do with their major weather patterns. And right off the bat, take a look at this clockwise wind rotation. And oh look, there's another one. And both of them are north of the equator. They are not that rare of a thing. So, storms do not curl because the Earth is a spinning ball. And the direction of a storm swirl is just dependent upon which side of the jet stream it is on. Nothing more.
There we go. So those jet streams, those winds that we talked about in 2 episodes ago, as we mentioned, seasons, tides, and time zones, where you got from the national weather data, their services that provide mapped out, detailed, sometimes live and sometimes pre-recorded information of what the weather and the winds were doing, even on the same side of the equator, right? Northern hemisphere, everything north of the equator on the azimuthal equidistant map, even in the same side, you got 2 separate patterns of winds circulating in opposite directions, both on the alleged northern hemisphere. And they'll show you this in their weather data maps that you can go looking for, but they're not advertising it, right? Because that would fly in the face of the Coriolis effect that they're clinging to. The Salty Sergeant mentions something here. The sun and the moon create hot and cold air pockets along with the ice ring, which mix with the wind to cause the effects we see. Yeah. And the winds that are coming through beyond the alleged, the ice, the Antarctic Circle, those winds coming in, as well as, you're right, that's something that we didn't really talk about. We alluded to and suggested that it's a possibility that the sun and moon have an electromagnetic current coming with them. But as we addressed in episode 10 last season, Sean, the moon produces cold.
That's right.
The light that emits from it can be measured to be cold light. And so if there's heat coming from the sun, cold coming from the moon, as they circulate over the earth,
in addition to what's coming in from the actual portals of wind from the firmament,
all kinds of jet streams spinning in different directions because of the lows and high pressures. So no Coriolis effect needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's almost as if it's there's a wonderful Christian pastor that's passed on, and we don't agree with everything he said, but his name was Chuck Missler. And Chuck Missler used to talk about something called a transmission, signal interruption or prevention of signal interruption. He was just talking about coding and how when you're doing mathematical coding with websites and things and different types of programming, that you want to make sure that there's no signal interference. There's nothing that could interrupt the process of the information flowing, so you can get your intended outcome.
Sure.
So when I think of, yes, the sun and moon, even the stars, and if my interpretation of Job is correct, and how the sweet, subtle influences of the constellations, as mentioned in Job. So you got the sun, moon, and stars being a point of electromagnetic influence onto the actual weather patterns coming in from the portals of the firmament, as we read about in Enoch and other places. You've got quite a few variables that all come together to create this wonderful ecosystem that we call our weather system. One of the well-known topics of the enemy that is against God is weather manipulation.
Correct.
Which would be signal interruption or interference, right?
And apparently part of that manipulation is also manipulating our mindset about it and what we think. They manipulate the weather in our minds even.
That too. Yes. Like there's, we haven't really done an episode on, have we done an episode on a harp? We haven't done anything on harp, but there's both in the past and in present day, there's active efforts by people that reject the creator and his system of order that would like to change the weather for advantageous purposes, right? And also for acts of warfare. And so this to me is just makes it that much harder, is all I'm getting at, Wes. If the creator designed multiple things that all move together, multiple moving pieces that make it harder for the enemy to interrupt what he created, that would be wonderfully fitting for a master designer as he is.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Just a thought.
Well said. Yeah. Nice thoughts. What was next on the agenda? Let's kind of flow through some of these just to show you an illustration here. A train with the smokestack coming out, you know, the heavy smoke that comes from one of those old trains that burn off the charcoal and the coal. The smoke coming from it is obviously indicative of a moving train because it trails off behind it. So
Right.
then when you go up high in the air and you're looking at stationary objects, things that are, you know, fixed to the earth and not, you know, rolling along on a track like a train is, you got like a volcano or a smokestack off of a building with heavy industrial smoke coming out of it. You don't see it trailing off as if the earth were moving with the smoke trailing behind it. That you don't see it like you do with a train, indicating that the earth isn't moving.
That's right.
And no, you can't say that the plane is in a fixed atmosphere that's rotating with the earth. It's
right.
a Coriolis, just to reiterate. Would you read about the Felix Baumgartner?
All right. So Felix, if the earth were really consistently spinning eastward at over 1,000 miles per hour during the Red Bull stratosphere jump, Felix Baumgartner, spending 3 hours ascending over New Mexico, should have landed 2,500 miles west into the Pacific Ocean. Instead, he landed a few dozen miles east of the takeoff point in New Mexico.
He landed east, whereas if the Earth were spinning east to west,
right,
he should have landed thousands of miles west after spending 3 hours while the Earth rotates 1,000 miles per hour underneath him, allegedly. But he landed east of the takeoff point. Definitely no Coriolis or Earth rotation accounted for there.
Yep. Yeah, it's man, it's so interesting that this stunt, you know, this exhibition was done. What was it, 2015, 2014? It's just so interesting why they would. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Yeah, right. They use the fisheye lenses for anybody that's watched that, and they even have gotten caught using multiple lenses and incorporating multiple different events of doing that jump into the same footage to make you believe it was all the same. But even the writing on the capsule that he's jumping out of changes, and like the logos and decals that they have on the outside of the capsule just indicate over and over again that there was camera tricks and fraudulence happening to make you believe what they were doing. But even Neil deGrasse Tyson has said that from that altitude, you cannot see or discern or observe the curvature of the Earth because of how low in altitude he was, which is why they used a fisheye lens to force a barrel distortion to make it appear as if there's a curvature of the Earth when there isn't one. We'll do an episode maybe on fisheye lenses in the future. Yeah. But here's one. Edward Hendry. He wrote a book called The Greatest Lie on Earth. This guy's still alive. This is in Modernity that he wrote this. And he says, David Wardlaw Scott explains experiments done in England at the turn of the 20th century using a cannon, which showed that there was no Coriolis effect whatsoever manifested on Earth, thus indicating that the Earth is motionless. In the experiments, a cannon was fixed firmly on the ground in a precisely vertical position. The cannon was fired. The cannonball ascended for 14 seconds vertically, and it took another 14 seconds for the cannonball to fall back to Earth, for a total of 28 seconds of the cannonball being aloft in the air, right? If the Earth were traveling eastward at 600 miles per hour at the latitude in England, the cannonball would be expected to land almost 5 miles to the west of the cannon. However, that did not happen. The cannonball fell generally within a couple feet of the cannon. In a couple of instances, the cannonball actually returned to the cannon's mouth. Could you imagine shooting a cannon straight up and the cannonball comes right back down into the cannon?
This dude was nuts.
Yeah.
Hilariously nuts, man. Because you're like, bro, it's like, you know, when you're a kid, you want to shoot an arrow in the sky, and then
lawn darts.
Yeah, any sane adult around you is going to stop you from doing that. But this he's stepping it up. He's not shooting, an arrow. He's shooting a cannon. Right. Straight up in the sky, and then like, oh, where's it going to land? I hope he was standing a good distance away.
Maybe they had a remote firing or a long fuse for that cannon to be able to get some distance from it. Yeah, otherwise it's like the most dangerous game of lawn darts. Like you're not playing with just
and you know what's hilarious is you absolutely know this guy as they're planning the stunt or this experiment, you know this guy checked which way is the wind blowing.
Sure.
And he stood opposite of that. You know what I'm saying? Like I promise
As snipers need to.
Right.
But if snipers have to adjust for a Coriolis effect when they're shooting sometimes 3,000 yards, sometimes a mile away, and that shot, because of the speed of the bullet, the projectile coming from the ammunition, that would take approximately a second and a half, maybe 2-3 seconds for a sniper shot to fire and reach its target, sometimes up to a mile away. That takes seconds. This guy shot a cannonball and it was up in the air for 28 seconds, much longer than any sniper shot have to account for. And it didn't, move with the spin of the earth because of a Coriolis effect.
The gravity is less up there, so it just took longer for it to.
Oh, but bro, we did a show where we showed gravity is fake.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you remember now. All right, cool. What else is on the slides? Yeah, so this is just an illustration to show you guys. What do you see here, Sean?
I see a Coriolis example, a little diagram trying to show the different speeds at different points of the spinning globular ball, even though it's not on axis, but that's okay. It's trying to show that there's at the equator, it's over 1,000 miles an hour of actual speed versus being near the Arctic, which would be what we would call the North Pole, which is a lot less, right? So 75 degrees north, you're looking at less than 300 miles per hour of actual spin if you're on an actual globular structure.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just, not only is that not what people observe, but obviously your Coriolis effect would be far, far less. So this whole concept should be very easy, right? Like the guy in Brazil or the guy in South America with the different basins, he's doing the water and everything. So where's the guy in northern Canada, right? Or in Iceland? Where's the guy in Iceland that is also standing there at customs gate doing basin examples? You know what I'm saying? It should be extremely noticeable, Coriolis there. And I mean, everyone who fought in World War II, there should be documented examples of all their artillery fire in Northern Europe, where they're fighting the Germans, versus the artillery fire in Northern Africa, where they were actually, I shouldn't even say that, in the Philippines, where the Japanese and the American forces were fighting in the Philippines. You should see all these accounts of how their artillery fire was being pulled in different directions. But anyway, I digress.
We don't see that though.
Yeah.
Right. What gets me about this illustration and these alleged facts given to us by the mainstream science, people who propagate this indoctrination, they try to tell us that at the North and South Pole, at the furthest most points, from the equator, they say that the spin is 0 miles per hour. So let me get this right. If I'm sitting on the very top at the North Pole of a spinning ball, I'm spinning it. I'm not spinning at all. There's 0 miles per hour of a spin there. You see what I mean?
Right. If you're standing in the center axis of a merry-go-round,
you're not spinning at all.
You're still spinning.
Yes, you are. So
you're still going to get sick.
It could not be 0 miles per hour is my point. Yeah. But that's what they tell us, that there's a 0 mile per hour
like
spin.
When the older kid is telling the younger kid, oh, if you just stand right here on the merry-go-round, you won't get sick.
Yeah, right.
It's like, it's just trolling him.
You're not going to spin. You're going to spin at 0 miles per hour. No, that's not a spin then.
Right.
So yeah, and you said earlier it should be simple. I think this would make it incredibly, intensively, progressively, exponentially difficult and complicated for a sniper, because they would not only have to determine the direction, their location, but their location according to the longitude and latitude based on how fast they say the Earth spins at that latitude, latitude line.
The traveling speed and direction of the observer versus the traveling speed and direction of the object observed. Mm-hmm. So this means all radar would be, especially battleship radar, like pinpoint, laser point, WASP style radar, would be extremely difficult for them to do. But yet they can find ships over 100 miles on the open water with no problem. Same thing with railguns. Railguns can shoot over 100 miles in literally seconds. And so it's just amazing that, anyway, but I don't know. I can't remember. Do you have a slide on railguns on this one?
Not railguns specifically, no, but we are going to talk to we're going to hear from an interview that Mr. Skiba did with a Navy missile specialist.
Nice.
So that's coming up pretty quick, and we're almost done with it. What's next here? Just a couple quick memes to help illustrate the ridiculousness is that the sniper's bullets are in the air for seconds, and they are affected by Earth's spin. However, an airplane is in the air for hours, and it's not affected by Earth's spin. You never hear of a pilot saying that when he flew west that he had, or when he flew east, that he had to, you know, account for the Earth's spin, that the runway is never moving at 700 or 1,000 miles per hour underneath them as they have to land on it. And another meme on the right here, Coriolis effect allegedly, right, affects bullets, but not hot air balloons, because we know
Now,
you can, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
Just
cut you
that we know that you can get in a hot air balloon and float above the same point that you launched from for hours, and then descend back down to the same, you know, launch spot where all the balloons are landing and launching from after having been in the air for hours, not affected by Coriolis at all.
Yeah, and all three of these, the plane itself, that I've heard people try to give the excuse that, oh, well, with the plane, it's propulsion, and it's steered with its ailerons, and it's, you know, its tail, I can't remember the name of it, but
lift and drag, and
well, no, just the actual directional mechanism, as well as the push, the actual propulsion of the jet engines themselves.
Gotcha.
Is that it's overcoming the Coriolis, and that's why they need the GPS coordinates to stay on target and all that jazz. And I'm just, go ahead.
Just that hot air balloons don't have that, right? Is that what you're getting
right?
at?
Well, yeah, just like with the bullets, those are they're single point of trajectory with nothing to guide them mid-flight.
Yeah, there's no propulsion.
Right.
Yeah,
the things on the bottom. The airplane is the most extreme of that example, where it does have lots of ability to be guided mid-flight back to its destination, even if it was being overcome by Coriolis. But still, the rate at which it's flying versus the rate at which the Earth is spinning, if it was going actually west, you should see a massive need to adjust on a regular basis, right? But it does not do that. They can be observed in most flight patterns, as in flying in a straight line, and there's not just the constant massive adjustment that would be needed. So this is kind of goes back to our airplane discussion, like we talked about when we were reviewing the curvature. I don't know if we talked about the SR-71 Blackbird that can fly at 2,000 miles an hour, and with the actual curvature formula with that speed, they would have to actually be nosing down at a rate that's impossible for it to not literally just fly off into space in the upper atmosphere.
Right.
So this is where, in that same regard, instead of, you know, up and down, it'd be left and right as far as direction for a 777, you know, heavy airliner and the flight that it's trying to achieve. Hot air balloon, very different, because then it's, you know, again, all this is literally, as we already discussed, all this is literally just from the point of the observer. There's nothing actually happening. There's no actual force moving on these things. It's just the point of the observer claims that they're moving, but in the reality, they're not. That's the crazy part, is both the object, there's no actual force being pushed on it. Science admits that.
Yeah.
But then they try to throw it off on, well, it's just the observer's observation, but then
we don't observe it.
We don't observe it either. So I really like one of our comments that we have and right here. It's from Tracy, and she's saying, where'd it go? Tracy said, they count on us shutting off our minds when it looks too complicated.
Yes, very much. I gathered a lot of that from trying to read through these scientific explanations that are put out from the establishments about this Coriolis, because it's just like Sean said earlier, lawyers speak. It's like they use their own definitions for certain words, and they those assumptions are built into their explanations. So it's silly. What else did we have here? Yeah, so a simple solution, right? Just you want to prevent a sniper from having to account for the Coriolis effect. Well, the Coriolis effect apparently does not affect a hot air balloon, as I said, just floating for hours above the same spot. So just put a sniper in a hot air balloon, and that way they don't have to account for that Coriolis. Just to be funny here.
Yeah, it's silliness, really. But this is something that's that we have a real world observation that literally involves life and death, and would involve the Coriolis effect if it were something that could be observed, demonstrated, or measured. Right. So
with snipers, right, they have to be careful to not shoot the wrong person. You know, that can, like you said, life and death. With airplanes and these, you know, huge aviation projects that the military has to undergo, these things are millions, sometimes billions of dollars. And so you think they would train these people according to the effect, if there's such a serious phenomenon going on of the spin of the earth and how that affects things and causes them to drift in different directions that might not be intended. These people need to be trained on that, because that's serious and could affect your work to the point of life and death, like you said. But snipers, airplane pilots, neither are accounting for
That's
this. And here's a buddy of ours, Anthony Dickinson. He's over on the Enclosed Cosmology Fellowship roundtable discussions that they do over on the Take on the World TV channel. Shout out to those guys over there, Vader Bear and all of them. And Anthony Dickinson is a bit of a marksman himself, right? I don't know that he's military trained, but he did get his hands on a military training, sniper training and employment booklet here from the military. And he said he found some interesting reading material here, but nowhere in this book does it ever mention Earth curve or Coriolis effect. Yep. The snipers are not trained for it.
Nope. And neither was Dick Cheney when he shot his friend in the face with that buckshot.
No,
so
he apparently
he was anticipating the Coriolis, but it just didn't happen. Anyway, he blasted his friend right in the face. So,
yep. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Skiba dearly departed. God rest his soul. He had a awesome segment that he did where he recorded an interview with a gentleman from the Navy who had been employed in missile systems and radar that you mentioned earlier. And I'm really excited to show the people what he had to say.
Cool. Yeah, let's
play hear him out. This is a guy who would know what he's talking about when it comes to this sniper and missile stuff.
Now, here's a video archive of one of the radio shows that I did with Sean McCary. Now, Sean is a Sparrow Surface Missile System instructor. He's a master training specialist in the U.S. Navy. Okay? Listen to what he has to say about the whole idea of allegedly having to adjust weapons for the Coriolis effect.
I am a missile system instructor right now. I teach it to the new fleet of the Navy. And prior to that, I was a NATO Sea Sparrow surface missile system operator out in the fleet. And, you know, we went through very, very rigorous training, electronic training, troubleshooting, operation, everything. We have detailed schematics on how our system actually works, all the way down to how the circuitry of all these circuit cards that run our system are laid out. And, you know, like you said, I can't get into anything super specific, but I will tell you that with my missile system, we have the ability to track something, you know, 50 nautical miles away with our radar that we use for this missile system, which is over, you know, 50 miles away. First of all, you have to understand that our radar, the beam width on it is only 2 degrees, and it's a fire control radar, which means that it's not like a normal search radar that just spins. It's a tracking radar. So it stays fixed to the target that it's tracking. It's not sweeping it. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, it's a 2-degree pencil beam. It's looking at something 45 nautical miles away. That's not possible if it was flying, if the target was flying at like, you know, 100, 200 foot off the ground. That should still be, you know, well below the horizon of a curved model. And I have no problem tracking a target like that. I can stay locked up on it all the way till it flies over my ship.
Okay, so now wait. Now, at what altitude are you above the surface of the ocean from your tracking station?
It's like 120, 130 feet above waterline.
And you're tracking something else that's about 100 feet above the waterline.
Yeah, we'll say aircraft for now. However, when I'm talking from a perspective of my weapon system, it's meant to shoot down bad guys. And what do bad guys do? They take a low-flying profile and they sea skim off the surface of the water. Reason for that is because they like to defeat the blind zones. The closer they can fly to the deck or the water line, the more invisible they are on a radar.
So we're talking, you know, give or take, fairly even ground on both ends. At a distance of 45 nautical miles, I just punched up a nautical to statute mile converter. That's about 51.7 statute miles away, which on a ball would be 1,667 feet below the curvature. But
yep.
Yet now, is this a line of sight deal?
It is a line of sight radar, and it has to maintain a direct line of sight lock on the target to actually strike it with radio frequency and then receive that reflected radio frequency back into our receiver and maintain the track on the target. But let me hit people with this. When we shoot our missile, there's absolutely no signals that are being sent to it that deal with the Coriolis effect. There's no signals that deal with curvature and dealing with, curvature trigonometry. It's based upon a planar model. Even our fire control computer, whenever NATO was established and came together as a big think tank to make this weapon system, it had 13 countries involved with it. And, when you look at this thing, the radar that calculates all this, the intercept points and, how fast the target's going, what our missile's doing, this computer, it comes from a Norwegian tank. That's the computer. So it's based upon old technology of firing artillery shots, which only deal with an X and a Y coordinate scheme. Which, for anyone that doesn't know, that's a flat model. That's not a curved model.
That Coriolis thing, because one of the early pushbacks that I got when I first started looking into this was from infantry guys. And, guys are shooters, and they always were about the Coriolis effect, saying, long-range shooters always have to adjust for the Coriolis effect. But it seems to only apply to bullets, because what I could tell, it doesn't apply to missiles, to cannonballs, pretty much anything except bullets. What would your answer to that be?
I absolutely have no faith in the Coriolis effect at all, because Coriolis effect doesn't exist. Second off, the people that sit there and acclaim, oh yeah, we have to take the Coriolis effect into account for this super long shot, I think that has to deal with self-aggrandizement and brainwashing, honestly, because it's not something that's taught from a practical sense whenever these people are trained on any of this. Long-range snipers are taught, distance and windage. That's all they're taught.
Do you ever have to adjust for Coriolis effect if you're shooting a missile?
I'll put it to you this way. The missile, I don't even think it's arguable that I can hit a target much further away than a sniper can. And I will tell you this. There is absolutely no circuitry designed into the engineering of our missile system that accounts for anything closely resembling a Coriolis effect. Absolutely not. Okay. Not at all.
Not at all.
Wow.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Rob Skiba.
Strong testimony.
For bringing that to the table. Yes, sir. So, man, yeah, if a missile, somebody who's a training specialist, master training specialist from the Navy, who fires missiles that sometimes takes minutes, full minute or two to hit its target from the distance of miles, of hundreds of miles, more than just 3,000 yards like a sniper, if he doesn't have to account for a Coriolis effect shooting full minutes and miles, then a sniper definitely can't and doesn't have to account for a Coriolis effect when his shot only takes a couple seconds to hit its target. It's a contradiction. They both cannot be accounting for the Coriolis. It cannot both be true. I love Mr. Rich P's comment here. He says he's quite disappointed with the FAA. Mr. Rich P is a pilot. He says he's disappointed with the FAA for allowing him to become a pilot without the knowledge of how to adjust his navigational instruments for Coriolis. Thank you, Mr. Rich P, from the horse's mouth of a pilot right there. And I look forward to doing an episode maybe on flight paths and plane rides, maybe we'll call it, where we just examine how pilots and airplanes and flight paths don't have to account for the spin of Earth, and they don't make sense on the globe model, but make much more sense on a azimuthal equidistant map like a flat Earth map, biblical cosmology map.
That's true. They do. I've seen some interesting videos, breakdowns on that, and it's amazing because it's something that we use every day, right? People fly all over the world every day, and just that in itself is, like we've been talking about a few times throughout the last hour and 40 minutes, is the premise of all this thing with the Coriolis is that they don't want you to trust your own senses. They don't want you to believe what you can actually observe, and they want you to believe what they've told you that you should be seeing, which you don't. Which no one does. You can actually observe what you don't see and do see, but it's called brainwashing, guys. It's part of indoctrination, is to get you to think of outside of something that doesn't actually make sense, but you should believe them anyway because they're the authority that's telling you that stuff. It's a part of subjugation and indoctrination.
Yep, brainwashing. We got a whole Foucault's pendulum segment to rush through. Let's knock that out if we can, brother.
Sure.
What was, oh, there was, yeah. So Foucault's pendulum right here is from science.howstuffworks again. They say that a Foucault's pendulum is anchored by a ball bearing and has an extra large pendulum mass and a super long string so it can swing slowly and withstand the effects of air resistance. Since the pendulum doesn't have outside forces influencing its movement, the only thing acting on it is the rotation of the earth beneath it. As it swings, the Coriolis effect makes the pendulum veer off to the side and slowly change its swinging plane. After about 24 hours of painful waiting, you'll see that it has made one full rotation. So a little bit ambiguous again, right? It doesn't necessarily give you a detailed explanation. And this is common. This isn't just how science.howstuffworks.com explains it, but almost always that when they explain their position, it basically amounts to the earth rotates under the swinging pendulum.
Right.
Instead of the obvious that the pendulum is rotating above the earth.
That's right.
And the earth is fixed and immovable, like God says. But they say that it, after 24 hours. So they also have to count on the fact that nobody's going to sit for 24 hours. The average human person is not going to just sit there that long to say, oh, okay, it's made a full rotation. I've sat here for a full day, and now I've determined that this is proof of a spinning ball.
Right. Yeah, it's silly, but for all the reasons you said, as well as just the simple fact that this, that coming with the 24-hour day are different temperature changes, which is different pressure changes in the very room that this little pendulum would be swinging in, which obviously is going to affect how it moves.
Yeah, they don't pressurize the room inside of these museums. And
and there's all types of different temperature changes throughout the day and night. I think it's interesting that it's a ball with what looks like an actual Greek throne on top of it, but that's another conversation.
The Roman kind of pillars, almost. Yeah,
it's almost like a Satan's throne on something. Anyway, but so we can move on.
Yep. Real quick too. If you go back one more time, it says here that the pendulum, since the pendulum does not have outside forces influencing its movement, is what they say. We're going to prove that to be wrong here pretty quick too. So next slide, please. Read this one, please, sir.
In the mid-19th century, a Frenchman named, named Léon Foucault became famous for swinging pendulums and claiming their consistent motions were proof of the Earth's diurnal rotation. Since then, Foucault pendulums have regularly been swinging at museums and exposition halls worldwide, purporting to provide everlasting perpetual proof of the heliocentric spinning ball Earth theory. The truth is, however, unbeknownst to most of the duped public, that Foucault's pendulum is a failed experiment which proves nothing but how easy it is for pseudoscience to deceive the malleable masses. Wes, do you have in here how they actually start the swinging of the pendulums?
We're about to discuss it. Yeah, we're about to. We're going to even show Mr. Rob Skiba again, having gone to one of these places and interviewed the people that work at the museums and exposition halls where they have Foucault pendulums, and they will tell us. So, real quick, if we could just move through the next slide before we get to that. I can't really read it. Would you be able to?
Sure, I can read it. So Foucault's pendulums don't uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise, sometimes they fail to rotate, and sometimes they rotate far too much. Scientists who have repeated variations of the experiment have conceded time and again that it was difficult to avoid giving the pendulum some slight lateral bias at starting. The behavior of the pendulum actually depends on 1, the initial force beginning its swing, and 2, the ball and socket joint used, which most readily facilitates circular motion over any other. Interesting.
So you mean to tell me that in order for the Foucault's pendulum to do its sideshow gimmick parlor trick, somebody has to swing it?
That's right.
So that would automatically discount the claim that no outside forces are affecting its swing.
but they expect the masses not to understand basic ideas, right? Because it's like, to call them out on that, think about the first person ever who pulls back the pendulum, and is going to let it go, and there's a crowd watching. It would require someone in the audience to go, wait a minute, wait a minute. You just applied an outside force.
Right.
And then for them to go, nothing to see here. Look what the Earth's rotation is doing to this thing now.
Exactly.
And you're like, bro. So the actual gumption that was required for an actual person in the public, because all they would have to do is look at him and go, just shout him down with, quit being unscientific. You see, so like it's that social peer pressure of, do I stand up for what's obvious, or do I have to believe something that's told to me that's literally observably false, right? It's falsified. It's not even just falsifiable, it's literally falsified the moment they try this experiment, which is hilarious to me.
It is. It really is. So yeah, that the claim that no outside forces are acting on a pendulum would suggest that you can just have a pendulum. You know, maybe it has to have that ball bearing socket and a really long string and a heavy mass. Let's say all that's true. You can just have a pendulum sitting there and the Earth's rotation is going to affect it and it's going to start swinging because of the Earth's rotation. Obviously not. They have to put it into motion, which require an angle of force and a certain amount of force to provide the effect. But then even then, think about this. If you were to set up something like this and push it, like think just about the pull strings hanging from your ceiling fan even. If you push that, it's eventually going to stop moving and it's going to sit still because of drag, air resistance, density, buoyancy, right? Instead of gravity. But it's not going to just sit there and swing uncontrollably. So if you'll go back to this slide, think about also wrecking balls, these cranes with the wrecking balls on them, as I have, illustrated here in this image. Wrecking balls aren't just swinging crazy of their own accord because of the Earth's rotation. If they're not being swung with a force behind it, they're sitting perfectly still and no Earth rotation is affecting it. But this says the supposed rotation of the Earth is completely inconsequential and irrelevant to the pendulum swing. If the alleged constant rotation of the Earth affected pendulums in any way, then there should be no need to manually start pendulums in motion, right? That's what we were just saying. If the Earth's diurnal rotation caused the 360-degree uniform diurnal rotation of pendulums, then there should not exist a stationary pendulum anywhere on Earth. Yet those exist.
Yes. I mean, it literally exists the moment they set up the elaborate exhibition before they pull it to swing it. So like from the moment they let go of it and put the little ball joint socket in place and hover it down above whatever thing, it should start moving.
It should.
Yeah.
If the Earth were rotating, according to how they frame the argument and act as if it's proof, right? But yeah, we have a quick interview here, real quick clip of Skiba going to Hollywood at an observatory where they house one of these exhibition of the Foucault's pendulum. Let's hear what he has to say.
Now, this socket joint thing is rather interesting. About a year or two ago, I went to the Griffith Observatory in Hollywood, and it's a pretty famous observatory. It's been in a lot of movies and stuff like that. It's the one up on the mountain across from the Hollywood sign. And of course, as soon as you walk in, immediately, as soon as you walk in the door, it's a dome, sort of like the Capitol Dome in Washington, D.C. And it's lined with paintings of science mixed with pagan gods. So there's your first clue right off the bat. You got science mixed with pagan false gods, which I would contend are fallen angels, Nephilim, demons. They fall into that category. All right, so just below the dome there, you have probably one of the more famous Foucault pendulums here in the United States. Now, listen to what the tour guide had to say about how this thing works.
If you're wondering how we keep it going with an electromagnet. Otherwise, due to air friction, it would slow down. We'd have to jump in there every hour or so and give it a push. But our electromagnet keeps it going even after we close at night. It keeps going and swinging back and forth even after we close.
Because there's an electromagnet gently pushing this, overcoming the laws of gravity and wind resistance. Otherwise, the pendulum would slow down and stop spinning. So, otherwise someone would have to go down there, like when it was originally invented, and keep pushing the pendulum every so often to keep it in motion. Otherwise it would slow down, and every 15 minutes we'd have to go down there and push 240 pounds of brass to keep it in motion.
So there's some kind of magnet making that thing move?
In the ceiling there's a blue ring up there. You want to look up there? The magnet is helping overcome the force of gravity, keeping this pendulum in motion. Otherwise it would slow down and stop like the smaller model will do here in a short amount of time.
Thanks.
Does it prove the spin of the Earth? No, it doesn't, because the claim that's made by the mainstream science institutions, which we've already debunked, when they say that no outside forces are working on the pendulum to cause it to rotate the way it does, other than the rotation of the Earth, has not only been disproved by the fact that somebody has to start it and swing it into its motion to begin with. Now they're telling you, the tour guides who operate these things and, well, at least show people how it works, will straight up tell you there's an electromagnet on these devices that tick at a certain time frequency to keep it going. And I would argue it's likely it would be equally easy for them to use the electromagnetic to push the direction and use the force necessary to spin it in the way they need it to spin to prove the proof
like
they're trying to use. Yeah.
Big copper ball, electromagnetic. Why don't they use a big wooden ball, right? And then because they need the electromagnetic. So like I 100% agree with you. But by the way, rare photo from the mid 1800s, we found the first initial force that caused Foucault's pendulum to actually move. It was Betty White.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, what's her face? I came in like a wrecking ball.
Well, Betty White came in like a wrecking ball. So
she was the OG wrecking ball.
She was 1800s, early 19th century wrecking ball. She was the first initial force. No, I'm just playing, guys. It's an old joke because she was old when she died. So, and it's also funny to see her on the wrecking ball. Yeah. But so it's crazy to me that this stuff is like, literally, these people aren't signing sworn affidavits to not tell this information. They just go right up to Rob and he asks them and they tell him.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a huge secret. This isn't a conspiracy or national. They just expect you to not ask. Because they've already told you what to see. They've already told you it's your feet. It's the thing under your feet moving, not the literal electromagnet they've got going full time to move the thing.
And they also invoke gravity by saying, if we didn't have this electromagnetic, then gravity would cause this to stop working the way we say it does. So silly. A couple quotes real quick about this that I wanted to read from. We've introduced Lady Blunt before. Oh, real quick, you can buy one of these, right? 3B Scientific. You can Google 3B Scientific Experiment Foucault Pendulum right now. If you got $7,500 laying around and you want to buy some alleged proof of the Earth's rotation, you can get one, and it's electromagnetized. It's got 230 volts running through it, 50 to 60 hertz running through it. And a Foucault pendulum is a long string pendulum with a heavy bob, which can be used to demonstrate the rotation of the Earth. In this experiment, a pendulum 1.2 meters in length is used. The direction of its oscillations can be very accurately determined by projecting the pendulum's shadow. For long periods of observations, any damping of the oscillation can be compensated for with the aid of an adjustable electromagnetic system to provide additional momentum. They straight up tell you, yeah, we got some electronics in this thing that'll keep it moving.
Oh my goodness. Silly. Brother, think about the 1800s. What, like, when you see old movies and you see like, what was it famous for? What was it? It was famous for snake oil salesmen and con men.
Right.
And it was this, I can see it now. Industrial Revolution moving into this quote unquote scientific age. I can see it now. You got these people that they stumble across some, high polished mechanics, right? For just basic physics.
Right.
And they're like, I bet we can parlay this for $7,000. Is this the movement of the Earth?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And they're like, we'll see how many people buy it. And it's just hilarious to me. Like literally this whole concept came out of the era that's literally put in hundreds of representations in film and media and TV as like the age of charlatans.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oppressors and thieves, right?
Yeah.
The land of the thieves, home of the slaves.
All this stuff we're looking at, I mean, not just the fact that this little contraption here looks like a magician's box, but all this stuff reminds me of magician's tools that they would use to get you. Yeah, it's exactly. It's all. So it's think about scale, right? So in the ancient temples back in the day, they would build massive wooden contraptions to make it look like some of the idols were moving and the gods were speaking and actually doing stuff. So think about the scale of, all right, well, if we need to pull off a massive deception about what they think the reality is, we need a small scale contraption that can complement that thought process. Mm-hmm. And that has to be based off of sleight of hand techniques, distractive techniques. That is a part of magic. So then that moves into the bigger realm. Once they establish for the mass public the idea of the actual heliocentric model, where then everything, all the thought experiments happened in the void of space. And then it turned into, well, now the small contraptions won't work because we can't represent them properly. So then it became, we need cartoons drawn. We need CGI images made. We need elaborate contraptions like an entire $1 billion space program with a rocket that goes up, right? So that's the new stagecraft, right? Is that, okay, so the stagecraft complements the imaginary craft that they show you with the images, so that it's a big compliment to paint the bigger world that they're wanting you to believe in. And it's just literally all magicians' technique. All of it.
Liar's lying.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's wild, man.
Very well said.
It's
It is
so wild.
Really though. Yeah, we talked about Lady Blunt earlier. She in earlier episodes, she had written books because she was a staunch proponent of biblical cosmology. And so here's one of the books she wrote around the time of the 1930s through 50s, somewhere in there, right? She says, "We believe, with all due deference to the pendulum and its proprietor, that it proves nothing but the craftiness of the inventor, and we can only describe the show and showman as deceptions. A thing so childish as this pendulum proof that it can only be described as one of the most simple and ridiculous attempts to gull the public that has ever been conceived. It has been said that the pendulum experiment proves the rotation of the earth, but this is quite impossible. For one pendulum turns one way, and sometimes another pendulum turns in the opposite direction." If you go to the next slide, she continues. "Now we ask, does the earth rotate in opposite directions at different places at one and the same time? We should like to know. Perhaps the experimenters would kindly enlighten us on this point. If the earth had the terrible motions attributed to it, there would be some sensible effects of some of such motions, but we neither feel the motion, see it, nor hear it. And how people can stand watching the pendulum vibrate and think that they are seeing a proof of the motions of the earth almost passes comprehension. They are, however, brought up to believe it, and it is thought to be scientific to believe what the astronomers teach." Lady Blunt, The Romance of Science.
They are brought up to believe it.
That's
just like we are today.
Yeah,
little children are told, "Hey, look at this wallpaper with all these, planets."
And in every cartoon, every show they watch, it's all over the place. They're brought up to believe it.
Speaking of kids.
Yeah, that concludes our presentation for the evening. I'm glad we were able to get through it in under 2 hours, but there was just so much to cover, and I love being able to share it with you guys. Excuse my just energy tonight. I'm really excited, right? I'm happy to be back. And so I'm enthusiastic about sharing these topics with you guys. And it looks like from the comments that you guys have enjoyed it. I really appreciate y'all. Keep in mind the links in the description, right? We have options for you guys to set up with our Patreon, where, as you see, we give special prizes and giveaways for the people that support us through that outlet. We also have these t-shirts in the t-shirt shop, as we said. I look forward to getting your giveaway prize out to you guys, GR and Bob Cleve, as well as I look forward to getting in touch with you, Miss Keenan's crazy sister, so that we can get your prize out to you. If you didn't catch that, I hope you hear this and you have won. Otherwise, yeah, y'all check out the links in the description. Don't forget to hit like on the video. Put your thumbs to the domes, all 7 of them, if you would, as well as give this a share if you think that we covered the Coriolis effect and snipers. And if y'all would share this to your social medias. But yeah, we asked a question in the beginning of the episode, Sean. What do weather patterns and storm circulating winds and snipers and hot air balloons and helicopters, what do these all have in common? I would say the answer to this question, which mainstream science would tell you, is that they're all affected by the Coriolis effect as a result of the rotation of the earth, allegedly. We would have to say that all these things have in common is that none of them are affected by an alleged Coriolis effect or force, and none of them are affected by a so-called rotation of the earth, because that does not exist other than in the imaginations of sorcerers and magicians.
That's right. They are affected by demonstrable science like air pressure, buoyancy, density, as well as propulsion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. So I think that's all we got for you. Any other closing words?
Nope.
How does this affect our, in the grand plan of salvation? How does this, how does this change it? How does it make a difference?
Well, when Yeshua returns, the Coriolis will not affect him or the angels coming down through the firmament.
Or the stars that are falling, right?
That's
They're
right.
not going to have
or
to
those
account.
stars. Yeah. They won't be like slide or corkscrew pitches coming down from the firmament. And the New Jerusalem will not be affected either. But the salvation that we receive from the Father that's granted to us by our high priest, Yeshua of Nazareth. Many people call him Jesus Christ. People in Spanish communities call him Jesus Cristo. that wonderful story of how he can actually make atonement for you because of his position as your high priest and actually have the authority to raise you to eternal life. And we put our faith and trust that he will do that for us as his position as our Messiah. That is not directly affected by the Coriolis, but the Coriolis is a foundational piece in the overall lie for the average person to distrust the actual words of Scripture. So the words of Scripture tell us that we live in an enclosed environment with multiple layers of heaven above us, that where we live is completely firm, fixed, immovable, and never going to be moved. Whereas the heliocentric model teaches us that we're constantly moving in all these different directions, and that we do not have anything sure or foundational that is under our feet, but that we cannot trust our own senses, our own eyes, and observe where we live, and that what is under our feet is moving. So even in that's a psychological attack on us, which affects our faith, because if you can't believe in the Scriptures, then you're going to have a problem, which we've seen in my short lifetime. I've seen churches and debate over Genesis 1 and the definitions of the words still going on today. And there's many people that 100% believe NASA or the government narrative published in the textbooks over the plain and simple contextual definitional words of Scripture that repeats over and over and over again that the Creator who made you and loves you lives right above you and actually created an enclosed environment for you to stay in until he actually brings his home down to you later. So that whole story, that whole narrative is undermined by the heliocentric model in a grand way, because it makes you not even hear the original story and entertain, imagine with fanciful imagery and dreams of traveling to distant places and meeting strange creatures in an entire environment away from what the Scriptures say. And all of it, in a sense, psychologically hides your Creator who loves you and is right above you. So as a result of that, a lot of people have abandoned the faith because it does, in their minds, it's not congruent with what science purports. Well,
Millions a year.
Yeah. Millions a year. Yeah. I mean, according to my estimations I did from some Pew Research polls I read, it was up to 14 million people a year in North America. And so that's a lot of people every year. It's a lot of souls that actually get drawn away by a system of thought that has nothing to do with what the Bible describes. And so the Coriolis effect is just one of those supplementary pieces of that false thought system.
That's right. Perfect end cap. Thank you for sharing those closing thoughts, because that really brought it together nicely. We'll end off on a verse from Scripture. It's actually almost like an instruction in the book of Psalms, right? Chapter 96, verse 10. It says, "Say among the nations." This is an instruction for the people of God to say this among the nations, among the Gentiles, right? "The Lord reigns. Indeed, the world is firmly established. It will not be moved, and he will judge the peoples with equity," aka righteousness. So yeah, to say this to the people: the Lord reigns, Yahuwah reigns, and the world is firmly established. It will not be moved. Y'all keep that in mind. We bless all of y'all, and we ask that you bless y'all back. And shalom to you from under the seven domes. Let's end off on a track from the Beat Freaks, featuring a segment from Mark Sargent when he interviewed a young boy named Tristan, who called in to talk about his experience with his teacher and talking about these topics. And they made a fun song about it. But we'll see you guys next time. Much love to you. Thanks, Sean.
I'm a fighter, survivor, 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 survivor. I'm a fighter, survivor, 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 survivor. I'm a fighter, survivor, 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 survivor. I'm a fighter, survivor, 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 survivor. Hey, my name is Tristan, and I'm in second grade, and I asked my teacher to show me an experiment where water curves. She couldn't do it because it doesn't curve. The water always finds the water. Always finds the water. Always finds the water.
What'd your teacher do?
She just didn't talk to me anymore. All she did was walk away. And I was like, what is this about? What?
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther. She couldn't do it. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat an experiment where water curves. She couldn't do it because it doesn't curve. The water always finds its level.
What'd your teacher do?
She just didn't talk to me anymore. All she did was walk away. And I was like, what is this about? What?
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther. She couldn't do it.
Up for sound bites. This is awesome.